Hello, and welcome. My name is Tricia Brooks. I'm a Senior Program Officer in the Division of Public Programs at the National Endowment for the Humanities. This session will cover the basics of applying for a Public Humanities Projects grant, which supports museum exhibitions, historic site interpretations, and public discussion programs. I will provide a brief overview of the NEH and the Division of Public Programs, which administers the Public Humanities Projects grant, and outline Public Humanities Projects grants. I'll cover some key items you should know before you apply, explain our review process and the timeline for notification of the results of your application, and finally, I'll provide information on how to contact us if you have any further questions. The National Endowment for the Humanities is an independent federal agency with the mission of supporting humanities scholarship and making it broadly accessible throughout the United States. It was established in 1965. Okay, but what are the humanities? The humanities are a group of academic fields that reflect on the meaning of the heritage, traditions, history, and culture of human beings. So this includes, but it is not limited to, things like art history, musicology, history, philosophy, religious studies, and literature. The NEH is made up of 7 offices and divisions. Each offers grant opportunities supporting different types of humanities grounded activities. The Division of Public Programs, which is the home of the Public Humanities Projects grants, supports projects that bring analysis of humanities ideas to large, diverse public audiences. So the Division of Public Programs offers 4 grant programs: Digital Projects for the Public, which funds projects that use digital platforms to provide public audiences with interpretive content; Media Projects, which fund long-form documentary films over 30 minutes, as well as radio programs and podcasts; Short Documentaries, which fund films under 30 minutes; and of course, Public Humanities Projects, which I will be talking about in detail. So all grant programs in the Division of Public Programs are only open to organizations. These grants do not support individuals. Applicants must be U.S. not-for-profit organizations, such as those with 501c3 tax-exempt status, or accredited nonprofit educational institutions. Also funded here would be state and local government agencies and federally recognized tribal government entities. These grants are not available to individuals, to organizations from outside the U.S., or to for-profit organizations. All projects that are funded through the Division of Public Programs must be grounded in humanities scholarship. We're looking for projects that are deeply informed by research from the related humanities fields. This doesn't mean that other disciplines cannot be part of the project, but in every project we fund, research and scholarship from humanities fields plays a deep and central role. Projects also must deepen the public's understanding of significant humanities questions. We support projects that provide analysis of the subject. Projects must go beyond being descriptive of facts or events to provide audiences with analysis that helps them build a deeper understanding of the impact and significance of the topic. Additionally, projects must collaborate with other scholars. We are looking for projects that take multiple perspectives into consideration. As a result, we want to see a group of project advisors that will challenge the core project team to think differently about the topic and introduce diverse viewpoints to audiences. We also look for projects that attract broad regional and national audiences. If you're working on a locally focused project, the project should consider how your location fits into the larger regional or national context so that your content addresses broader concepts that can draw relevance for wider audiences. Projects should also be designed with encouraging dialogue and exchange of ideas in mind. So we want to see projects that make people think. Perhaps the project causes audiences to reconsider past perceptions or to consider completely new ideas and subjects. Whatever it is, we seek projects that will inspire people to engage with those around them about the subjects and ideas presented. So that brings us to the specifics of the Public Humanities Projects Grant Program. This program funds in-person engagement of broad audiences with analytical content. As I noted, this can be in the form of exhibitions, interpretive programming at or about historic places, or through holding community discussion programs. Obviously, COVID-19 has greatly impacted in-person programming, but despite COVID, the hallmark of public humanities projects is that they offer in-person experiences, and thus proposals must plan for programming to take place in person. There's no way to predict if social distancing or shutdowns will be an issue moving forward. Therefore, we encourage you to include in your application contingency plans, if appropriate, to address how you will develop and run programs if social distancing or shutdowns are necessary. Contingency plans can mean converting a discussion to virtual or to offering programming digitally. So now let's look at those specific categories for this grant program. First, we have exhibitions. Funding is available for permanent, traveling, or temporary single site exhibits. Permanent exhibits for the purposes of this program are defined as exhibitions that are intended to be open to public audiences continually for at least 3 years. Traveling exhibitions are defined as exhibits that will run at no fewer than 2 public venues in the United States, and that can include the venue at which they originate. Temporary single-site exhibitions must be designed to be available to public audiences for at least 2 months. There are 2 funding levels for exhibitions: planning and implementation. There are a number of differences in the funding levels depending on whether your project is permanent, traveling, or temporary exhibition. So for planning grants, for all types, all 3 types, um, the maximum funding level is typically $40,000. However, if you're planning a complex permanent or traveling exhibition, that is projects that involve multiple partnerships, collaborations with organizations, or projects that are multi-format, such as if you're planning for an exhibition and an accompanying website and a set of robust public programs, then you may request up to $75,000. Implementation grants for permanent and traveling exhibitions are for up to $400,000, and temporary single site exhibitions, the maximum implementation grant is $100,000. In a moment, I will also address some special supplemental funding opportunities that can be requested at the implementation level. So the next category is historic places. Proposals may be for interpretation of any type of historic place, which can include historic houses or trails, historic neighborhoods, historic districts, an entire city, a living history museum, etc. We do not require that the historic place have any sort of special designation, like being a National Historic Landmark or being listed on the National Register of Historic Places. We leave it to the applicant to define what a historic place is, why their place is historic, and to provide an argument about the significance of the site. These projects must be for long-term programming, which, like permanent exhibitions, we define as intended to be continually available to public audiences for at least 3 years. The proposed programming may take many different shapes. So living history programs, docent-guided tours, self-guided tours, interpretive site signage, walking tours of a district, exhibitions at a site or about a historic site. Here again, there are two funding levels, planning and implementation. Planning is typically $40,000 maximum, with that same caveat that complex programs are able to request up to $75,000, and implementation is for a maximum of $400,000. Again, later I will explain some supplemental funding that can be requested at implementation. The last category is humanities discussions. This category funds series of face-to-face programs that bring scholars from the humanities into discussion with community members, using humanities resources such as films or works of art, historical documents, or literature to ground that discussion. This can include symposiums, panel discussions, reading and discussion programs, lifelong learning programs, film viewing and discussion programs, or analytical discussions of performances. Be aware that we do not fund the creation or performance of art, but we do fund scholarly examinations of art, both visual and performance art. If it's grounded in humanities scholarship, we will fund the discussion of or the critical examination of those things. Programs must take place over the course of 3 to 24 months. Unlike the other categories, funding for discussions is available only at the implementation level, and it is for up to $250,000. Humanities discussion programs also must address the NEH A More Perfect Union initiative. So this initiative is a special encouragement commemorating the 250th anniversary of the Revolution. Projects should examine the United States' quest for a more just, inclusive, and sustainable society. This can be achieved through many different subjects, but of particular interest are projects that explore issues of equity and equality, the American landscape, America's role in the wider world, and the Constitution and principles of democracy. This special encouragement is for applications across the entire agency, but in other grant programs, proposals might not be required to relate to this initiative. In public humanities projects, only humanities discussions are required to address a more perfect union. So, how do you know which funding level is appropriate if you're applying for an exhibition or historic site? First, you need to have identified and you need to be able to provide a brief discussion of the major analytical ideas, which we often refer to as humanities themes, that you plan to explore in your exhibit or site interpretation. In addition, you need to have scholars from outside your organization that have committed to work with you to shape the project, and you need to be able to describe some ideas you have for interpretive elements that might be effective for your project, like an idea that you have for an interactive activity, or thoughts about the ways that you envision using particular works of art, maybe how you might use specific spaces in your historic site, or the approach you might take to address a certain topic. If you have all of these things, if you've thought about them, then you are ready for a planning application. The takeaway here is that we've named this level planning because we do not expect that you have developed everything necessary to actually start building your project. However, we do not fund projects at their most nascent stages. This means that you must have done some critical thinking. You must have done some planning in order to be ready to apply for a planning grant. You must have thought carefully enough and done some research about your project to have developed some goals to enable you to convey to us your vision of what the project might look like when it is complete and open to public audiences. This necessitates that you provide some specific examples of your ideas for both analysis and interpretive techniques. The planning grant period is designed for you to plan for exhibit and historic site interpretation. Again, humanities discussions is only funded at the implementation level. But you can use this planning funding to finish your research, to refine the content, evaluate and fully develop the format and interpretive methods. Grant funds can be used to collaborate more deeply with scholars, to refine your thematic analysis and work with exhibit designers and interpretive planners to develop an engaging experience. You can also use this time to work with other organizations as appropriate and build partnerships that will contribute to the interpretive concept or help you create interpretive formats, or maybe open opportunities for outreach that will expand your audience. Funds can pay for testing your concepts for interpretation, so you can build prototypes. You can work through ideas with audience focus groups. The grant period is typically 12 to 24 months, and at the end of your grant period, your final products should include things like exhibition design documents, a list of objects for your exhibition, draft of exhibition labels or tour scripts, development of training programs, or an interpretive plan for your site. Although we ask that you provide us with enough specifics in your application so you can share your vision of what the project could be, the activities of the planning grant period should foster growth and possibly change in your project, with the final outcome being the blueprints you will follow to build your project. So what if you're in the final throes of building your project? You've collaborated extensively with outside scholars and are planning to continue those relationships. You have well-articulated themes with fully developed arguments supporting your analysis. And you have complete design documents, tour scripts. You've got plans for training, discussion facilitators, for example. Then it would sound like you're ready for an implementation application. At this level, we're looking for projects that are thoroughly developed. Elements of the application will require that you describe the visitor experience in great detail to demonstrate what audiences will see, hear, and do, and exactly how that will contribute to building their understanding of major thematic ideas. We want to see the questions you expect to ask of panelists in discussion, the lists of objects for your exhibition, descriptions of what interactions with docents would consist of. You should be ready to build or open your project to audiences before you apply for an implementation grant. It's important to know that you do not have to apply for or have received a planning grant prior to applying for implementation. At the same time, it is also important to be aware that if you are applying for implementation of a project that did receive planning support, those applications are not given priority in the funding decisions. So implementation grant awards run for between 1 and 4 years, and they support the final steps of producing an exhibit, a site interpretation, or discussion. This can include activities like continued meetings with scholars to review products or conduct final refinements to content. The fabrication of exhibition elements, the production of all sorts of materials like education materials, catalogs, websites, brochures, signage, conducting training for docents, for facilitators or other staff, promoting the project, and conducting summative evaluation. So if you are applying for implementation, one of the supplemental funding opportunities is a position in public humanities. So this is funding that enables you to hire someone who graduated within the last 5 years with a master's or a PhD in a humanities discipline related to your project. This can include museum studies, museum education, or library science, if that is applicable to your project. The position must be full-time, and you may request support for either 1 or 2 years for this position. It has to run during your grant period. Job responsibilities must be appropriate for an entry-level professional with this educational level of background, and must include responsibility for elements of public engagement related to the proposed project, such as organizing discussion panels, designing gallery tours, or creating family programs. The person in this position must be a new hire. You cannot apply these funds to support an existing position or an employee. You also must advertise the position widely and conduct a broad search. You may request up to $50,000 per year for this position. So 1 year at $50,000, 2 years at $100,000. That $50,000 goes towards the salary for this position. If you feel the salary needs to be higher at your organization, then your organization must pay the difference. In addition, your organization must pay benefits that are equivalent to all the benefits that are offered to any other full-time employee at your institution. This funding is in addition to the maximum $400,000 award. So that means if you request a position in public humanities for 2 years, then your maximum award becomes $500,000 rather than $400,000. The other type of supplemental funding that's available to implementation awards is a chairman's special award. These are extremely rare awards. So generally no more than maybe one is given in a year. To be competitive for these awards, a project must address deeply significant topics and be an ambitious, complex project with multiple formats and the potential to reach exceptionally large national audiences. For such projects, the maximum request is $1 million. So your application will be evaluated based on review criteria that's stated in the Notice of Funding Opportunity. That criteria with the exact same wording is given to the peer reviewers who are asked to comment on how each application responds to each of those criteria. The main criteria for this grant program is first, the intellectual content and humanities significance of the project. So reviewers are asked to comment on the quality and relevance of the scholarship and analysis that the project would offer to audiences. The format and the program resources, which looks at the efficacy of the chosen interpretive methods to communicate the analysis and engage the audience, and at the appropriateness and significance of the resources available to successfully carry out that interpretation. And then there's the audience, the relevance of the subject to the intended audience, and the potential ability of the project to reach a wide audience. We also look at the project team and the humanities advisors. So we're looking for the experience of the staff and the consultants and the demonstrated potential for their skills to enhance the project. And then the project feasibility, which is the appropriateness of the budget and the efficiency of the work plan to achieve the project goals. Humanities projects are offered at 2 deadlines each year. The upcoming deadlines are August 11th, 2021 and January 12th, 2022. Applications for all categories and all funding levels are accepted at both of these deadlines. There are a few very important things that you must know before you apply. First, all applications must be filed online through the website grants.gov. In order to access the grants.gov system, your organization will need to have a DUNS number. This is a unique identifier that is issued by Dun and Bradstreet. Once you have that, you are then able to register for the System for Awards Management, or SAM. You must have a SAM registration in order to establish an account with grants.gov, which is necessary in order to be able to access applying for the grant. It is important to know that it can take 2 or more weeks in order for you to get the SAM registration. It can also take another 2 or more weeks to get the grants.gov account established. So please visit these websites, www.dnb.com for the DUNS number, uh, sam.gov to get your SAM registration, and grants.gov to get your grants.gov account. Please visit those websites now if you do not already have registration with all of these organizations. If your organization does have accounts set up, you should check and make sure that they are active. SAM accounts must be renewed annually, and grants.gov accounts are made inactive if they're not used for a year. So they can easily be reactivated. SAM can easily be updated annually, but you must make sure that you have active accounts in order to be able to apply. Failing to register or reactivate accounts will prevent you from submitting an application. So our website offers a number of essential resources for preparing your application. One way to find information is to go to our website and click on grants, and then enter the keyword Public Humanities Projects. And that will take you to the landing page for Public Humanities Projects. The landing page has on the right-hand side a short summary of important information, funding levels, deadlines, etc. The majority of what you'll see initially when opening that page on the left side is a brief description of what is funded in the project. If you scroll down on this page, you'll find a lot of other materials which I encourage you to explore. I'm going to highlight two of these things that are both found in this step 1 section, review your application package. So first is the notice of funding opportunity. Read this carefully. When you've finished reading it, read it again. This document contains all the information about this grant program, including very detailed directions for preparing your application and for preparing all the required documents. Second, I want to call your attention to the samples of application narratives. These are previously successful narratives from applications. These can be very helpful in illustrating for you the amount of detail and type of information that makes a proposal competitive. We have a number of different samples listed here from all the funding levels and each of the categories. On this page of our website, you'll also find other resources, such as a direct link to the grants.gov application package for this grant program, lists of recently funded projects in each of the categories, and a frequently asked questions document. After you've carefully read that notice of funding opportunity and you're ready to begin writing your proposal, keep these characteristics of competitive proposals in mind. So competitive proposals do not use specialized or technical language or assume any prior knowledge on the part of the reader. Some reviewers may not have a specialty in your subject area or in your professional field of practice. For those who received an NEH grant for a project at the planning level and are now applying for an implementation level, reviewers will have no knowledge of your project. They will not know that you received a previous grant unless you explain that in your application. Competitive proposals also offer clear arguments for why their topic and project are of significance. We're looking for projects that are analytical, and your analysis should speak to what makes the topic important. Therefore, your articulation of the significance of the project will lay the foundation for the critical ideas you want to communicate through the project. We are also looking for projects that are deeply grounded in humanities scholarship. So competitive applications are the ones which clearly demonstrate how scholarly analysis informed the project content. We require projects to include collaborating scholars. In general, this means scholars from outside your institution. Your application should provide evidence of how those scholars have and will continue to contribute to shaping the analysis included in the project. So we often say that we fund content first as the analytical scholarship is of primary concern to us. But to fulfill our mission, that scholarship has to reach an audience. So a competitive application presents strategies for marketing the project and demonstrates that it will effectively reach an audience. Provide us with some evidence, like your annual visitation numbers or tourism numbers that show how the interests or activity patterns of visitors in your area intersect with your project. Give us some well-substantiated arguments that demonstrate that your target audience, it can be reached by the selected advertising outlets that you wish to use. Finally, this is very important, competitive applications follow directions. It is critical that applications include all the required information and attachments. It is also essential to stay within the stated page limits. Violating these requirements can result in your application being declared ineligible for review. So one of the most important things that you can do to build a competitive application is to contact a program officer. It's critical that applications include, we can answer questions about the grant program and the review process. We provide advice on preparing applications, and one unique thing that's offered by the NEH is that we will read drafts of your application prior to the deadline and provide you with feedback. This isn't true of all NEH grant programs, but it is true of public humanities projects. The draft review process is not required, but it's strongly encouraged. Applicants frequently comment that this process was invaluable in the preparation of their application. So to receive this feedback, you must submit a draft 5 weeks prior to the application deadline, and I'll say at least 5 weeks prior to the application deadline. You can submit it sooner. For this grant program, for the August deadline, the drafts must be submitted by July 7th, 2021. For the January deadline, drafts must be submitted by December 8th, 2021. So what happens after you submit your application? First, staff will look over all the applications that are submitted and will sort them into groups of about 15 or 20 based on the subject that your application addresses, as well as the category format in which you have applied. We then recruit a panel of peer reviewers. All applications are reviewed by a group of peer reviewers. For this program, we typically recruit 5 reviewers who will read your application and provide comments. 2 of these will be public programming professionals. So for example, they might be museum directors or museum educators or curators, as well as professionals who run other types of public humanities programs like programming librarians or humanities center directors. The other 3 reviewers will be subject area specialists with expertise that aligns with the content of your project. This group of reviewers will read the applications and offer initial comments in response to the review criteria as it is stated in the Notice of Funding Opportunities and rate each application. Following that, we convene a panel discussion meeting with the full group, either virtually or in person, to discuss the applications and get them to give us a final rating for each project. Then the staff in the Division of Public Programs will use the advice of the panel reviewers to make funding recommendations to our National Council on the Humanities. This is a group of 26 presidentially appointed professionals. They are confirmed by the Senate, and their role is to advise the endowment. They then make recommendations to the chairman of the National Endowment for the Humanities, who is also presidentially appointed and confirmed by the Senate. And the chairman makes the final funding decision. The National Council meets 3 times a year to review applications. Applications that are submitted in August will be reviewed at the March Council meeting, and notification of decisions will be made in early April. Those applicants who receive funding at that time are able to start their grant period as early as May 1st, 2022. So August 2021, notifications will take place in April 2022, with the earliest start of projects being May 1st, 2022. For our January 12th, 2022 deadline, the Council will meet in July of 2022. Projects will be notified of those decisions in August of 2022, and those receiving funding can start the projects as early as September 1st of 2022. It is important to note that you may have only one pending application for federal funding that covers your project. You cannot ask for federal funding support for the same activities in more than one application. So please be very cognizant of the dates during which your application is considered pending. From the time it is submitted until the time of notifications, your application will be considered pending, and you cannot submit any other applications requesting support for those same activities during that period. It's also important to know that whether you receive funding or not, the comments from the reviewers are available to you. They are an incredible tool that applicants always tell us that they have used, whether they were funded or not, to move their project forward or to revise their application and resubmit with a stronger application. So it is highly recommended that after notifications, after decisions are made, you reach out to us and request a copy of those comments. Now you have a general overview of what's involved in applying for Public Humanities Projects grants. As a final reminder, be sure your application is submitted by an eligible not-for-profit organization based in the United States. Make sure your registrations with SAM and grants.gov are active and up to date. Check out the resources that are available on our website, in particular, those samples of previously successful applications. And again, I cannot say it enough. The most important thing you can do is contact a program officer. We mean that sincerely. From questions about the grant program or eligibility to assisting with preparing your application or talking through the comments you received on a past application. We're here to help you. We want to help you. The most effective resource available to you in this process is the NEH staff. So thank you very much for viewing this webinar. Be safe and please be in touch with us. Have a pleasant day.